Hello, I'm Grant from Maker's Vlog, and today I'm going to be talking about routers again. If you've seen the last one, I spoke about routers just in a home environment. I was hoping to get home and enterprise done in one video, but it sort of dragged on. So in this one, I'm going to be talking about routers in a small business sense. And when I say routers, it's probably more geared towards firewalls, really, because whenever you start getting into a small business where you actually need something to do some decent protection, you're going to need something a bit beefier than just your bog standard router. And in this one, I'm going to be going through briefly a Ubiquity, a security gateway, but I'm also going to talk about Ipv6 as well, which is an open source system, so you can install it near enough on any computer. I'm not going to touch on it too much because it's the one that I'm going to be using in the network project that I've spoken about, and so I'll be doing a full install from scratch and config on it. This is more of an overview of what sort of features you need or would be ideal in an environment setting. So I'm using this website here, which is a router emulator link, and it links to a lot of different routers that you can then see their features and go through their things without actually having to buy the appliance, which is quite nice. So first of all, I'm going to show off the Ipv6. So this is the closest thing I could find to a dashboard for it. Might be a bit hard to see there, but you got system, interfaces, firewalls, services, VPN, status, diagnostics, and help. All cool stuff. Like I say, I'll go over Ipv6 in depth whenever I actually go to getting it configured. So the first thing we're going to look at, or well, what we're going to look at today is the Ubiquity stuff. Now the Ubiquity devices all link into this unified dashboard, and they all link together, and you configure them from one place, which is actually quite nice, and especially for a small company. Their devices aren't that expensive. I'm not sponsored by these guys or anything like that at all. Honestly, if you're doing stuff like this in a small business and you want to keep it cheap, Ipv6, because you can install it on an old computer and it'll work. So it's up to yourself, but this is quite nice, the way that they integrate everything together like this. So this is the dashboard that you'd see, which has everything on it. If we go to devices here on the left hand side, we'll see here you got the gateway at the top, which is the router firewall. And you see here it's a security gateway, and then you've got all the switches here, which in a small business, you'd have one really. And your wireless access points, as you can see, there's a crap ton. Again, in a normal company or a small to medium business, you'd maybe have one or two access points. But as I said, it is nice that all this is linked together, and if you're making changes, it automatically populates them to the right device, which is good. That's something that you don't really get with other vendors. So if, say, you had a Ubiquity gateway but a Cisco firewall or a Netgear firewall or just an unmanaged firewall, whenever you make a change on the gateway, you're going to need to also make a change on the firewall to reflect it if you're doing VLANs or things like that. But this does it all in one. If you configure it here, it's smart enough to work out which switch it needs to go to, which is nice. How well that works, I don't know. I've never worked with this in an actual production environment, but on paper it looks good. So if we go into settings, and this is site information, so this is just company information, about the site where the devices are on. Don't need to worry about that. Wireless networks, this is quite nice. If you remember from the personal home routers thing that I was talking about, I talked about splitting your network into a guest and a personal. This is the same idea, and in a company this is a lot more common, where you have guest, administrators, corporate Wi-Fi's. You'd have separate Wi-Fi's for different things, just depending on what way your company works. You might have multiple of these, you might have less. So moving on, networks, and this is the VLANs that I was talking about. You can see here VLAN, you've got 20, 30 and 10, and they've also respectively named the subnets, so the network ranges that these VLANs use. They've named them, or they've used a range that corresponds to the VLAN. So that's VLAN 10, and they've used 10.0.10. This one is VLAN 30, and they've used 10.0.30. This one they've used VLAN 20, and they've used 10.0.20. You don't have to do that, so you don't. That is just their way of making it clear from the administrator's perspective what network each of these are and what VLAN that corresponds to. That's just a neatness thing. You don't have to do that, but I would recommend it because it's quite handy. As I said, you can create your networks in here. You can go through all the standards. I'm not going to step through this because, you know, the settings that you'd put in here, it depends entirely on what you're doing on the network. And as I said, this is just a brief overview of what you should look for in a more industrial strength, for want of a better word, router for a medium business or a small business, sorry. So you can go in, you can create another network. So say you have some new devices you want to keep separate, you can create your network here. And as I say, this will automatically stick it onto the switches and everything else. But more importantly, let's go on to the routing and firewalls. Static routes I'm not going to touch on because that's a job for network people, and yeah, let's not. Important thing here is firewalls, and this is the thing that really you want to look out for, and this is the difference between a firewall appliance and a router, a home router that you might have that just has it says it's got a firewall built in. So if I go to create a rule here, and let's say we want this to be the name doesn't matter, it's just for your reference, so we'll just say CGP deny guest. Okay, so what I'm saying here is that I want, or what this says to me if I was looking just at the name, it's internet traffic is denied on the guest network. Now, if you're actually doing this and setting this up in the company, you're going to want to come up with a naming convention, so something that's standardized so that any IT person or anyone who comes onto this can understand what this means, and they can actually understand it. So you'd need to come up with a standard, because otherwise, like, this makes sense to me, but it might not make sense to the next IT guy that comes along. So naming conventions are important. But what we want here, action, we're going to have reject, so it stops the traffic. You can either have it accept or reject whether it matches on this rule. And the way these firewalls work is they go down the rules, and whenever they match on a rule, they will either reject the traffic, the network traffic, or they will accept it, depending on what way you've got it set up. Ipv6 Protocol, again, this is a network person will understand what's going on here. For features you don't need to know, just need to be aware that for a good firewall, you're going to want to have, you're going to want to be able to select all these. And to be honest, I don't know of any firewall appliance that will not have all of these features. So they will be in there. For this, we're just going to say all. You can enable logging, which means anytime this rule is matched against or it is activated, it logs it, and then that way you have a record of it. And the important bit here, so we'll get rid of the advanced. The important bit here is the source and destination, so where this traffic is coming from and where it's going to. You can either create it from a network, so in this case, as you can see, we've got our internal network LAN, our management LAN, corporation, and guest. So I want it to be deny guest, so we want it to be from the LAN guests. So we want it from any traffic from that network going to X destination, and in this destination you can see I've got HTTP and HTTPS. Now firewalls work on ports, and what ports are and how they work is a whole other topic, but just keep in the back of your mind that any communication over a network is going to use a port, and in most cases with common protocols it's going to be a predefined port. So for example, HTTP is port 80 and HTTPS is port 443. That is fine, that is fixed, that doesn't change. And the difference between the two is just one is encrypted, one isn't. So HTTPS is encrypted, the other one is not. But what we would do is we would create a port group, and we're going to call it HTTP and HTTPS. And we know that that is port 80 and port 443, and save. And there we go. And so what this rule will do is, if it matches on it, any communication coming from the guest network going out over the port port 80 or port 443, so basically to the internet, will be rejected. That's all that does. And if we save this, I'm actually surprised that's saved. So this is an emulator, so this isn't a real switch. And whenever I was testing this, that didn't save. But there you go. Some firewalls also have an order, so some of them will go, as you can see, this has got a rule index, and it will go one by one down them, and if it matches on one, it will stop. So that's important to know if your firewall does that or not, because you can end up missing rules. So say I put above this HTTPS allow guest and had an allow, oh there, see it's cleared it out. If I had an allow rule above that, as soon as it matches on the allow rule, it would stop, so it wouldn't get to the deny. Some firewalls take priority of denies over allows, so if there's an allow and even a deny beneath it, it'll still take the deny because denies take priority. It depends on the firewall. To be honest, if you are a small company and you're getting one of these put in, your best bet is to pay a bit extra and get the support, which most network firewall providers will have, and they'll find out about your infrastructure, they'll have a chat with you, and they'll help you set this up. You don't need to do this on your own, use the support if it's there. Or another main thing that you're going to want to look out for in a firewall is not necessarily called threat management, but this IDS and IPS. There are other third-party things that you can get, and I will be showing them in the network securing project. Whenever I do that, there are other variants of this that you can use and things that do this for you. But if you can get it built into the firewall, happy days. What these are: intrusion detection system and intrusion prevention system. Basically, the IDS sits beside your network traffic, so your internet is coming in, and this thing sits sort of parallel with it, and it looks at the information, it looks at the traffic coming through, and it watches for patterns, and it watches in particular for patterns that it knows that could be malicious or things that are out of the ordinary. Whenever it does this, the IDS detection system, it tells you, it logs it, it reports it, and it can, it pings you off an email or it notifies you in some way. That's all it does. The IPS, intrusion prevention system, sits in line with your network traffic, so it'll be sort of in the middle. And if it detects malicious traffic, something out of the ordinary, anything like that, it blocks it, it denies it. Now, you might be thinking, why would you pick intrusion detection over intrusion prevention? There are a few reasons. One is false positives. Both of these systems are not foolproof. They will match on things that aren't actually malicious. So you're going to have a bit of time going through and find out what is bollocks and what is not. But in the prevention system, especially if you have an actual environment like a web server or something like that, an IPS could bring your server down if it detects something funky. So there are pros and cons to both. The good thing with the IPS is that it's quick. If it notices something, it shuts it down quite quickly. And down here, the threat management categories, these are defined by the firewall provider. So in this case, Ubiquity, and these are things that they know to look out for, or certain types of traffic that you want to check. You can tick all of them, but if you think about it, especially with the IPS, it's going through it, it's going to make it very, very slow. Your internet traffic will slowly crawl if it is checking all of this. So again, get the support package and get this set up with one of their engineers, and they'll take you through this. Okay, and then guest control. The guest control is exactly the same as the guest control that I talked about in the home setting. So, exact same thing. The only difference being is that you can actually predefine IP addresses. So you can predefine what IP address it's on, or what IP range it can use, and you can also set up a guest portal. So if you've ever went on to Wi-Fi, on a boat or in a public place or plane or whatever, and you get that sort of splash screen, you hit the button, say get online now. Firewalls like this allow you to set up a portal like that quite easily built into them, which is nice because then it allows you to put terms and conditions, and you're not allowed to do this or you can't do that, or letting users know that their traffic will be monitored, which is a big one. So it does give you that functionality which isn't in a home one. Now that is basically it. That is what you would look for in a firewall, and what and what you're going to be, what you would need really in a firewall is that ability to make the VLANs able to do these firewall rules, and if it has it, the IPS and IDS is a nice touch, but you don't necessarily need it. But that is that's sort of what you're going to want as a small business. Again, this is if you have a server room. Really, if you have a couple of servers, you're going to want this. Or alternatively, even if you don't have a couple of servers, you just have a lot of users and a lot of internet traffic, something like this is going to be what you're going to need in there. Now, again, you don't need to go the full hog of, if we go into here, you can see, gateway, 4 switches, or, how many is that? Like 8 switches and umpteen access points. You don't need to go for that. You don't even need to go for the ubiquity switches. It just makes it, in this case anyway, it just makes it a bit easier. You also don't even need to go for the unified gateway. This is just an example. There are other inexpensive firewalls out there. As I said, I'm going to go through the config of the Ipv6 firewall from start to finish, putting all the rules in, all of that. This is just, again, as an overview of sort of what to look for, what is the main difference between the home firewall and something a bit more pre-built for that purpose. So I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions about these types of firewalls or things like that, or even if you're wondering, when do I need to make the jump from, a crappy, home style router to something a bit more more infrastructure geared, ping us, let us know. There's the email address in the description, there's a Discord channel, all that good stuff. So yeah, if you've liked, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.